April 2016, Mohammed bin Salman, the then Deputy Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, unveils Vision 2030. The goal? Diversify Saudi Arabia away from oil and make it a global business and cultural hub. To capture the world's attention, they unveiled jaw-dropping renders, futuristic cities and structures that look straight out of Dune. The Line, a 170-kilometer-long mirrored city taller than the Empire State Building. Trojena, a ski resort in the middle of the desert. The Rig, Red Sea Global, King Salman Park, Diriyah Gate, Qiddiya, Masr, and many, many, many more. All in all, they plan to spend $3 trillion to reshape Saudi Arabia and shake up the world. But fast forward nearly 10 years and the vision looks more like a hallucination. All projects are well behind schedule, over budget, and looking less likely than ever before to complete. What went wrong? This is Vision 2030, Mohammed bin Salman's nightmare. To better understand Vision 2030, we need to go back nearly 100 years. In 1932, Ibn Saud unified the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula to officially form the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And although it was a kingdom in name, Saudi Arabia was very poor and relied on subsistence farming to get by. Things only worsened during the Great Depression as demand for pearls weakened and pilgrimages to Mecca slowed down. To this end, Ibn Saud granted Standard Oil of California a 60-year concession to extract oil, and in 1938 they did just that, striking oil with the discovery of the Daman No. 7 well. Saudi Aramco was born. Fast forward to today, and Saudi Aramco has generated over $500 billion in dividends since 2020. Although this sounds great, there's a problem. Saudi Arabia is very reliant on oil. In fact, in 2016, oil represented nearly 82% of all Saudi exports. Fearing for its future, MBS decided it was time to revitalize Saudi Arabia and launch Vision 2030. One of the main pillars of Vision 2030 is to diversify the economy and develop private industry. How did MBS expect to accomplish this? One word, maybe two: Giga Projects. Taking a page out of the Dubai playbook, Saudi Arabia decided that to attract the talent of the future, they needed to build the cities of the future. And what does that city of the future look like? This. NEOM is a $500 billion futuristic megacity that launched in 2017. And the largest, most ambitious element of NEOM is the Line. The Line is, well, a line that literally stretches 170 kilometers across the desert and is expected to house 9 million people. Not only that, but the whole way across, it's over 1,600 feet tall, which is taller than the Empire State Building. Not to mention, it is fully covered in reflective panels. All of this required nearly 20% of the world's entire steel production and was to be completed in the middle of the beating hot desert by 2030. But given we are only 5 years away from the completion date, wouldn't some of this incredible megacity be complete? No. To date, no true structure stands. Instead, they have done a ton of trenches. But as anyone knows, in line construction, digging the trenches is the hardest part. Building 1,600-foot solar towers over 170 kilometers is super easy. The NEOM team realized that they were way behind schedule, so they decided to adjust their goalpost just a little bit. Instead of 170 kilometers, the line will now be an impressive 2.4 kilometers, a measly 98.5% reduction for phase 1. And instead of 9 million people, they will have an equally impressive 300,000 people. And as such, the line will be rebranded the Pittsburgh of the desert. Now, this is a screw up for sure. However, they continue to emphasize that the line will be built eventually. And pulling back up a level, let's remember that NEOM isn't just the line. It includes Oxagon, a floating industrial complex and automated port. Trojena, a mountain ski resort on a mountain that barely produces enough snow to make a snowball. And Sindala, a luxury island destination that differentiates itself from the thousands of other island destinations by being named Sindala, which sounds an awful lot like Cinderella. You get the idea though. NEOM has a lot of random projects that feel almost aimless, but there's a reason for this. Most of these ideas are being developed by MBS himself, but this is deeply flawed. For one, MBS has no formal training or experience in engineering, architecture, design, or finance. He is simply deeply passionate about science fiction and innovation. Furthermore, this centralization of decision-making around the Crown Prince has prevented an honest assessment of the project's costs and challenges. For instance, Thomas Paine, the original architect of the line, was prevented from expressing concerns about costs to MBS. A project manager for Sindala was removed after they challenged cost estimates, and even McKinsey, my alma mater, a firm that prides itself on its independent thinking, has seemingly helped executives juice IRR figures to make projects look better on paper. But at least McKinsey didn't go empty-handed. For their beautiful spreadsheets and lack of backbone, they have received $130 million in fees. This avoidance of having real and tough discussions has led to NEOM's expected cost to rise from $500 billion to $8.8 trillion. Yes, 25 times greater than Saudi Arabia's entire budget. And MBS is not happy. He is so unhappy that he actually left Tom Brady and Will Smith hanging at the launch party for his incomplete luxury island resort, Sindala. But at least they spared no expense on the party, spending an estimated $40 million, which I guess is a drop in the bucket given they spent $4 billion on the project to date. All this said, many Saudi fanboys will be quick to point out that the kingdom has actually increased its non-oil GDP in recent years. And this is true. Saudi Arabia has been hyper-focused on increasing non-oil GDP. One way it has done this is through its strategic investments through PIF, its sovereign wealth fund. PIF is not like other sovereign wealth funds. Its goal is not simply to generate returns, but to also support Saudi Arabia in diversifying its economy and innovating. To do this, PIF invests in businesses around the world. From 2017 to 2023, these investments generated an 8.7% annual rate of return, with these returns directly reinvested into local projects and more businesses. But here's where we get into some issues. For one, only about 20% of PIF is invested abroad, representing about $160 billion US, which sounds like a lot, but really, it isn't. Saudi's non-oil GDP is around $450 billion. An 8.7% return on $156 billion is about $13.5 billion, or 3% of non-oil GDP, which means that PIF's foreign investments mean very little in the grand scheme of things. Instead, Saudi's non-oil GDP is almost entirely linked to local projects, which might not be an issue until you realize that the bulk of local projects are related to NEOM. By our estimation, if you remove this spending, non-oil GDP may have actually declined. Why is this important? Well, it basically means that the Saudi government is failing to shift their economy away from oil in a durable and sustainable way. Yes, theoretically, they are increasing GDP, increasing employment, and the like, but Saudi Arabia can't indefinitely spend money on NEOM and other Vision 2030 projects. Instead, they need to achieve a return from these projects. Construction GDP is not a means to an end. But enough with the building. Who the heck is planning on living here? Once the structures are there, they need people to drive an actual economy, right? But before we do that, a few months ago, we partnered with economics and politics experts to launch a newsletter. It's free, weekly, has no AI slop, and covers issues around the world in 5 minutes or less. Check out the description to sign up. Now back to the video. Remember how they wanted 9 million people to live on the line, or in the line? That projection would make the line 10 times more densely populated than Manhattan. Even more alarming, this is 26% of Saudi's current population, which basically means that the line will be mostly populated by immigrants. Historically, the kingdom has had a net migration of around 6.7 per 1,000 residents, which implies 250,000 immigrants per year. This pales in comparison to the 9 million needed for the line. So how will the kingdom attract all these incredible people? For one, they want to streamline the visa process and introduce initiatives like premium residency programs and entrepreneurship visas. They want to introduce special economic zones to encourage investment, introduce scholarships and exchanges for students, and much, much more. And although these ideas aren't bad, there is a fundamental question that needs to be asked. Do the world's best and brightest want to live in Saudi Arabia? Highly educated people are generally more socially liberal. As such, they want to live in a place that reflects their cultural values. And Saudi Arabia is not that place. For one, Saudi Arabia has male guardianship enshrined in law. And yes, we are aware that these laws have been loosened, but they are still starkly contrasted to the Western world. For example, women still need a man's permission for marriage, divorce, custody, and travel with children and more. So this alone takes out a large chunk of educated women who would never want to live or work in such a place. And frankly, it takes out many educated men who also think such a law is deplorable. However, for those who would still work there for the financial rewards, they would likely be transitory, because unlike other expat countries such as Singapore, the laws of the kingdom make it extremely difficult to seriously consider a life there. But it continues. Saudi Arabia ranks third globally for executions, and I can already hear the comments. Singapore does the same thing, and people move there too. Sure, but there's a big difference. Singapore is still above the global average on human freedom, where Saudi Arabia is well below. And although Singapore has strict laws and a borderline closed press, there is religious freedom. You can dress however you'd like, you can drink alcohol, etc. In addition, foreign workers have historically been treated terribly in the kingdom. Saudi Arabia exploits workers via the kafala system, which grants employers control over migrant workers. In fact, it is estimated that 21,000 migrant workers from India, Bangladesh, and Nepal have died working on NEOM projects. Given this, why would people with Western values want to live in Saudi Arabia? And thankfully, we have data to support our hunch. According to the 2022 census, there are over 13 million migrants working in KSA, but countries like the US, the UK, and Canada only represent 0.2, 0.1, and 0.1% respectively. In a competitive world, the kingdom is deeply unappealing. Saudi Arabia's ambition and spending go far beyond building a tax haven. They want to create an innovation hub, a country for the future rooted in values that haven't changed in the past 100 years. The question the kingdom should ask itself is, if a foreigner is highly skilled and can make great money elsewhere, why should they pick Saudi Arabia? But here's the twist. This isn't just a foreigner problem. The problem is deeper and extends to Saudi citizens. Saudi Arabia ranked 41st out of 44 countries polled on STEM graduation rates. But even these figures need to be taken with a grain of salt. A recent report showed that Saudi had a financial scheme to make their universities rank artificially higher. They paid researchers to lie about their place of employment with the goal to attribute research to Saudi Arabian institutions. This speaks volumes to how the kingdom is dealing with its skills crisis. Instead of fixing the root cause, they're trying to solve it the only way they know how, by throwing money at it. But as we saw in NEOM, that simply doesn't work. Furthermore, it's not just an issue of skill, it's an issue of culture and work ethic. Reporting suggests that many Saudi public sector workers give little priority to hard work. It is such a deep-seated issue that the former undersecretary at the Ministry of Social Affairs has commented on this, saying, "This is an incredibly low level that needs to be studied extensively. Transforming our society to a knowledge-based one is the only solution." Part of the problem for the kingdom's poor work ethic is its heavy reliance on foreign labor, especially unskilled labor, which makes up the bulk of immigration. Even after making meaningful efforts through Saudization, the kingdom has struggled to convince its local population to work harder, especially in the private sector. Public sector jobs are stable and pay well, with 78% of unemployed Saudi Arabians saying they'd prefer a public sector job. This makes it harder for private businesses to hire locals, drives up the reservation wage, and deepens dependence on foreign labor. This issue is so pervasive in many oil-rich Arab nations, as locals have benefited deeply from strong government support, giving little incentive to change. All of this to say, we are skeptical that Saudi Arabia can be a beacon for innovation. The kingdom is not built to attract or produce top talent, but maybe they can convince people to vacation there. Creating a tourism economy is tough. When you ask people where they want to vacation, Saudi Arabia really doesn't come up all that often. A part of the reason is the aforementioned cultural issues. Lack of women's rights and dictatorships don't attract Westerners the same way freedom and mimosas do. But what if Saudi Arabia can flip the narrative and make itself a bastion for entertainment? Enter Live Golf. In 2022, the kingdom launched a rival to the PGA Tour called Live. The idea was straightforward. let's pay golfers way more and create a competing league so that they can attract eyeballs to Saudi Arabia. Sounds simple enough, but paying players guaranteed salaries without any care for performance is like paying a car salesman for wearing nice suits. In 2022, LIV lost nearly $250 million, and in 2023, this climbed to almost $400 million. With the piling financial struggles of LIV, you'd think they might reconsider this strategy, but no. They decided to do the same thing for soccer. PIF acquired a majority control of the 4 biggest teams in the Saudi Pro League, and through them spent over £1 billion on transfer fees alone. In total, conservative estimates put the PIF spending on soccer at over £2 billion. They signed players like Ronaldo, Neymar, and dozens more. So you'd think people are watching these games, right? No. In the 2023-24 season, the average attendance for SPL matches was a little over 8,000. Compare that to the Premier League with over 40,000 in attendance. But let's look at TV viewership. Surely that's better. Nope. Across 70 matches aired in the US, matches averaged 10,000 viewers. Compare that to the nearly 550,000 US viewers per match for the Premier League. No matter how you cut it, people aren't buying it. The best players in their prime don't play in the Saudi League, and even if they did, fans want community ties and heritage. Arsenal and Man United have both been around for over 140 years. Barcelona and Real Madrid for over 120 years. And over that time, they have won over the hearts of their cities and the world. They have captured the imagination of future soccer stars. In a word, they are authentic. The Saudi League is not. It comes back to the same point. Saudi Arabia is trying to buy their way into success. Put differently, anyone can make an Hermes bag, but no one can be Hermes. Saudi Arabia doesn't seem to understand that. These cultural attractions don't have a good ROI and don't leverage the advantages Saudi Arabia has. They are hollow. That said, people are visiting the kingdom. In 2019, 21 million people visited compared to 30 million in 2024, an increase of 9 million people. Although these numbers sound good, they come with a major asterisk. 18.5 million of these visitors were pilgrims visiting Mecca. That's over 60% of all visitors. Furthermore, 30 million is still a far cry from the 70 million needed by 2030 to make the numbers work. But let's give Saudi Arabia credit and assume they can make this happen. If you assume that these tourists spend in line with the international tourism average of $1,100 per trip, that equates to about $77 billion of revenue. Compare that to the estimated cost of NEOM of $8.8 trillion, and you get an incredible pre-cost ROI of less than 1%. That is a one-way path to bankruptcy. Even if you 10x how much people spend, it's still not enough to justify the cost of NEOM. And at this point, I don't even know why we keep doing so much analysis. This whole strategy is so clearly flawed and muddled. None of the numbers make any sense. The conclusion is simple. This tourism strategy is a mirage in the desert. Ambition and vision are great, and we applaud MBS for that. They are needed to change a society and take it to another level. But more than ambition and vision, execution is what makes things happen, and not the type that Saudi Arabia is known the world over for. Anyone can dream of incredible cities, innovation, and a wonderful future, but few can make it happen. Vision 2030 was just that, a vision. It promised grandiose cities and attractions without reconciling their purpose or ROI. It claimed it would attract the best and brightest from the world without addressing the main inhibitors for high talent immigration. It sought to establish itself as a cultural haven by creating fabricated attractions. And now, many years on, what have they accomplished? The takeaway? Mo money, mo problems. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, hit subscribe and check out our newsletter. We dive deep into topics like this every single week.